In part one, we went over democracy and how it may evolve at a conceptual, procedural, modular, generalized level derived after observing patterns through history and literature. We went over how Sir Winston Churchill felt democracy was the worst form of government and concluded that it is perhaps the government of last resort. We explained the process of devolution from order to monarchy and decline to aristocracy, oligarchy, and eventually democracy. We also went over the stages a society may go through as they're caught in a steady progression into democracy. At this point, after viewing part one, some observers may conclude that maybe the problem is division and we should advocate for unity and denounce division. That would be a natural progression of thought, but it's merely a palliative measure. So there's only so much demanding, advocating for, and commanding peace and unity that one may do. For instance, during the rebellion of 1776 by the English colonies, the people of Massachusetts hit upon why they will not be peaceful until they have quote unquote liberty. Uh, as a result, their early motto for the state of Massachusetts was Ence petit placidum sub libertate quietum. The sword asks peace under liberty rests. They were essentially saying that they will not have peace until there is a just peace. So the same goes with unity. Some with a vested interest in unity and keeping the peace may cry unity and peace, but unity may occur over righteousness. Therefore, it ought to be obvious that unity and peace and trust cannot be enforced nor demanded, but must come from righteous acts of leadership. It must emerge organically, and it must emerge from the good fortunes of the governed people. So some viewers may still be skeptical about some of the claims in the previous video and may still be wondering if disparity and inequity or inequality or injustice may necessarily lead to devolution into democracy, and if democracy is truly the government of near last resort. That would be a great concern and a great question because now we may attempt to go deeper into historical use cases to illustrate the validity of our points. Let's begin with Solon, the lawgiver, who found Athenians struggling with every manner of disparity, be it financial to racial injustice to gender-based inequities to uh, sexuality bending on account of their proximity to and and contact with and abuses of Africa, specifically Ethiopia in those days, and their weakness for improper contact and trade with unwholesome parts of the world. One indication of disparity is that every member of society may try to get ahead so they could avoid the fate of the unfortunate poor and oppressed, mostly folk who were exiled to Africa. These would be Greeks who would be exiled to Ethiopia. The Athenians, in an attempt to save themselves from these outcasts of their society would engage in race harm and exile their own people to Ethiopia, for instance. So Solon, observing their troubles, forgave the debts of some of uh, the members uh, of Athens. Uh, and for some people, he even paid out of his own pockets. This happened when his own friends learned that he was going to forgive everyone's debts, and they went out and took loans, and Solon basically had to pay the debts of his friends out of his own pocket. This is in Athens that is so mired in disparity that immorality, and in this case, more specifically, the desire to escape the disparately lower classes, is strong enough to betray friendships. Then Solon goes on to establish the laws of Solon to bring about greater equity. And then after that, Solon promptly ran away. This is perhaps what some people who misinterpret the nature of God call God forsaken land. The truth is that the Abrahamic faith uh, does counteract the cycle of degeneration into democracy by espousing leaders who are good shepherds who rescue the lost, not abandon them. But more on this later. With the departure of Solon from Athens, it seems uh, that ancient Athens is typical of the unruly nations who cannot seem to keep the lovers of the nation, or worse, persecute the lovers of the nation, as we will see later. Due to their, this is mostly due to Athens's own one too many misfortunes and prevailing misguidance. This is further complicated by the fact that truly loving a person, let alone a nation, is never that easy. In the in the end, Solon left Athens a far more equal and just society. Fortunately for Athens, as a less unequal, less disparate, more trusting society, it was once again um, a city more interested in living as opposed to administering matters of the state. With the lovely manner in which Solon treated them, the Athenians were encouraged, and they were more easily persuaded to abide having Solon's cousin Pisistratus as king, for example. That is after Solon left. Seemingly rejected by Solon, the Athenians end up getting seduced by Pisistratus, a cousin of Solon, who becomes their king, their shield, their defender, and their lover. But a love affair is rarely successful if it's one-sided or feigned. In this case, we are unsure if either side loved the other the way Solon loved Athens and vice versa. Alas, it seems all too few men love like Jesus Christ, the Jewish prophets, Solon, Numa, and the prophet and philosopher kings of great civilizations. So, can you blame Athens for embracing democracy since they were a little mistrusting of one another and of people attempting a power grab after what Pisistratus did? He didn't do it once, he did it twice. Once by feigning injury, as the reader might know, and, and if they don't, it's a little beyond the scope of this presentation to go into the details. And then uh, Pisistratus came back and pretended that Athena herself had chosen him as monarch. No matter how noble Pisistratus's motivations, his methods were questionable, and the collateral damage was suffered by one too many uh, of the peoples. The Athenians, after Solon, were so trusting after the Solonian reforms that they elected Pisistratus at least twice based on lies and fabrications. It is good to trust, but it is not. But trust is not to be worshipped like a god. The right action is to immediately remove people who have obtained power through illegitimate means, perhaps. Is it any wonder that the Athenians are brokenhearted and devolve into a democracy? So, when Solon returns, he is aghast that someone else is beloved and monarch in Athens. And even though he puts on a suit of armor to revolt against Pisistratus, none in Athens join him, unfortunately. This is because, as Solomon says, justice secures a monarch's throne, even when, as it seems to be the case here, uh, justice or equality is brought about by Solon and not Pisistratus. We see that Solon alleviated economic injustice and inequality. That was enough for the short term to reverse the decline into democracy. He coupled decreasing inequality and economic injustice with a strong leadership. In fact, his strong leadership helped him attack and alleviate economic inequalities, and this in turn solidified the renown and establishment of his laws and strengthened his position. So we see that Solon's strong leadership and tackling inequalities resulted in increased trust in society as Athenians turned to living a good life as opposed to the perpetual power struggle of the unfortunate nations. This increased trust in the absence of righteous leadership resulted in the unfortunate ascent of Pisistratus to the throne. Again, I cannot stress enough that uh, Solon, the righteous leader in all of this, was absent when there was a power grab, which should not have happened. So again, one more thing. Even though uh, Solon left and he left Athens better off, most of his measures were palliative measures, uh, and they basically left Athens's inequities intact. It meant that the changes he brought were superficial and reversed as soon as they lost the right leadership. Some of these palliative measures um, uh, that he took with regards to alleviating poverty and increasing trust could not overcome the measures that were in place by the Athenians, like race harm, sexuality and gender bending, financial methods of harm. Due to the prevailing inequities, Solon's reforms do not last, and the Athenians, unfortunately, um, resort back to voting. So they end up executing the likes of Socrates, using or rather abusing their right to rule by bringing about greater inequity by the murder of an intellect like Socrates. Whereas before, Socrates was merely praising the monarchy of Sparta in a defeated democratic Athens. Now, Socrates' pupil, Plato and Aristotle, will firmly be in the camp of philosopher kings and wary of the depredations of and decline into democracies. Now, avoiding doing the right thing seems to be a pattern, apparently, um, in those days, once too often, it seems. Uh, you see, it took Athens and the Greeks, the massacre at Thermopylae, to galvanize Greece into action against the invading Persian forces, for instance. Um, if the reader will remember, Sparta, the only monarchy, reacted first to the invasion of Greece, and it took the massacre of 300 Spartans for a nation with one too many traitors to act decisively uh, and righteously. We see Athenian reluctance again in investing in the defense of Greece, as evidenced by their reluctance to invest in a naval force to protect Athens and Greece from a Persian invasion. This resulted in the machinations of um, Themistocles to establish a naval force, which fortunately he did, which eventually ended up winning Greece the Battle of Salamis. It seems that there were one too many examples of people embracing the least amount of effort and the path of least resistance, establishing a low profile, and there was a prevalence of convenience and apathy. Uh, Athens could be said to suffer once too often with instances of balkanization uh, and mind your own business gone wild. The curious reader may be wondering, what is this righteous conduct at this point? Um, they might have encountered this term quite so often, and they might be wondering. Uh, and I would say that it would be a lovely curiosity indeed to wonder what righteous conduct is. Covering ways of engaging in righteous conduct is the topic of a separate series and is beyond the scope of this presentation, but it will be covered in decision making, rational and irrational, if there is interest from the viewer. So much for a brief overview of the development of democracy in Greece. Next, we will go over historical use cases from the Bible. Fillmore himself, but Locke specifically, interprets the Bible to self-aggrandize and promote the interest of his aristocratic class. And this excerpt is oft used in one too many alternative religious establishments. We will go over the Israelites and their relationship with their leaders and how the evolution of the societies fits in the model we described earlier. So I'm really grateful for your continued attention. This series was started because one too many management students were using voting to make decisions they ought to be making themselves. The uses and misuses of democracy instigated an investigation into the various forms of government and the nature of democracy. So management students and business students may rely on righteous conduct as opposed to decisions by voting. Um, the next part deals with further historical use cases outlining the descent of societies into democracy. Uh, Again, I hope you will come back.